The job market was a dumpster fire, so when I saw the posting for Remote Drone Stewardship, I didn't just apply. I practically begged for it. The pay was offensive, in a good way. We're talking $120,000 a year to, according to the description, monitor ecological integrity. The company was TerraForm Solutions. Vague, corporate, exactly the kind of name that has billions to throw at weird projects. The interview was a 30-minute video call with a woman whose video was, coincidentally, disabled. Her voice was a perfectly smooth, synthesized alto. She didn't ask about my experience or my education. She asked if I lived alone, if I had any pets, and if I was comfortable with non-standard observation hours. I lied and said yes to all three. I mean, my apartment is a shoebox, but I do have a goldfish named Captain. I figured he wouldn't count. 2 days later, a crate arrived. Not a box, a crate. Inside was a monitor that made my 32-inch gaming screen look like a smartwatch. It was a single, curved panel of glass, maybe 50 inches wide, and impossibly thin. There was also a lockdown terminal, a custom keyboard with no brand markings, and a single-page, laminated instruction card. The card read, "Connect terminal to monitor. Connect terminal to dedicated Ethernet, provided. The system will boot automatically at 23:00 EST. Your shift is 23:00 to 07:00. Log all deviations. Do not deviate from the logging protocol." That night, I set it all up. My tiny desk groaned under the weight. At 22:59, I was sitting in my gamer chair, cup of stale coffee in hand. At 2300 hours, the screen lit up, not with a boot-up logo, but with an immediate, blindingly clear image. It was a forest. But wrong. The monitor wasn't showing one feed, it was a grid of 12. Each feed was from a drone, flying high and silent over a landscape that looked like a diseased nightmare. The trees were skeletal, black, and slick, as if they were perpetually coated in crude oil. A thick, greenish fog hugged the ground, so dense it looked like you could swim in it. A date line in the corner read, "Sector K14, Appalachian Quarantine Zone." I had never heard of an Appalachian Quarantine Zone. My job, as the minimal interface suggested, was simple. I had 3 buttons. Tag Fauna, tag Fault, and tag Intrusion. For the first 4 hours, it was the most boring, most terrifying job I've ever had. The drones just drifted, their cameras high-spec, capturing every dead branch and patch of glowing fungus. The silence was the worst part. The terminal had no speakers, but the visuals were so oppressively quiet that my ears started ringing. I tagged Fauna twice, once for a 3-legged coyote limping through the muck, and once for a massive owl that seemed to have too many eyes, though it was probably just the camera angle. Then, at 3:17, feed number 9 changed. It wasn't a glitch. The drone wasn't moving. But the image was. Something was moving below the fog. Not in it, but under it, causing the green mist to ripple outwards in a perfect, concentric circle, like a stone dropped in a pond. I leaned forward, my nose almost touching the screen. The ripple was moving fast, heading toward a clearing. I kept my finger off the Fauna tag. This wasn't an animal. The ripple was too big, too methodical. It reached the clearing. The fog settled. There was nothing there. Just black mud and dead roots. I sighed, leaning back, ready to dismiss it as a pocket of swamp gas or something. That's when I saw the handprint. It was in the mud, right in the center of the clearing. It wasn't fresh. It was old, caked, and impossibly large. I'm talking as big as my entire keyboard. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was that it had 6 fingers. I stared, frozen. My instructions were to log all deviations. This felt like a deviation. I moved the mouse to tag intrusion, but my hand was shaking. Before I could click, a notification popped up in the center of my screen. It was a simple text box from admin. Steward 44. Please disregard deviation on feed 9. Focus on feed 2. My blood went cold. They were watching me. Watching me watched out. I forced my eyes to feed 2. It was a different part of the forest, high on a ridge. The fog was thinner here. The drone was hovering, looking down at a small, dilapidated cabin. A hunter's blind, maybe. As I watched, the cabin door, a single plank of warped wood, slowly creaked open. I waited. Nothing came out. The admin message popped up again. Tag intrusion. I did as I was told. I clicked the button. The moment I did, the light inside my own apartment bedroom flickered. I flinched, looking over my shoulder. The cheap ceiling bulb buzzed, then settled. I turned back to the screen. In feed 2, something was standing in the doorway of the cabin. It was just a silhouette, tall and impossibly thin, perfectly framed by the doorway, and as I watched, it raised a long, spindly arm and waved. Not at the drone. It felt like it was waving directly at me. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart was a cold rock in my chest. The silhouette in feed 2 held its impossible wave for 3, 4, 5 seconds. Then, with a slowness that felt mocking, it lowered its arm. The chat window flashed again, violently bright. Admin, acknowledge the tagged entity, Steward 44. Acknowledge? I whispered to the empty room. My fingers fumbled on the custom keyboard. What is it? The reply was instantaneous, devoid of any human hesitation. Irrelevant. Your task is to log, not analyze. Click the acknowledge prompt. A new button had materialized on my interface, right next to the tag cluster. A single, pulsing red icon labeled ACK. I glanced back at feed 2. The thing in the doorway. It wasn't a shadow. It was physical. And it was stepping out of the cabin. It was tall. Taller than any man. Its limbs were like stretched out lengths of black licorice, covered in what looked like wet, peeling bark. But it wasn't bark. It was skin. It moved with a horrifying, jerky gait, like a stop-motion puppet animated by a spiteful god, its joints seeming to bend in too many directions. It stopped in the patch of glowing green fog in front of the cabin. It turned its head, a pale, oblong shape, like a waterlogged plank of wood, with no discernible features, directly up at the drone's camera. Admin, acknowledge. Now. I slammed my finger on the ACK button. The instant my skin made contact, two things happened. First, feed 2 didn't just go dark. It imploded. The image collapsed in on itself with a visual crunch, like a piece of paper being set on fire from the center. It was replaced by a single line of static and the word, signal lost. Second, the cheap overhead light in my apartment didn't just flicker. The bulb exploded. A high-pitched pop echoed in my tiny room, and hot glass rained down on my desk and my hair. I screamed, shoving my chair back so hard it hit the wall. I was in the dark, lit only by the poisonous green glow of the 11 remaining feeds. The chat box appeared again, a sterile white rectangle in the chaos. Admin, a deviation has been logged and contained. Resume monitoring. Contained? I yelled, typing with shaking hands. It looked at me. The light in my room exploded. What is this job? What was that thing? No reply. The cursor just blinked out. I sat there for an hour, heart pounding, jumping at every creak of my building. The other 11 feeds were just the same dead forest, the same silent, rolling fog. Lifeless. But I knew that was a lie now. This place wasn't empty. It was a cage. And I was the zookeeper. Or maybe I was the exhibit. I tried to minimize the terminal window. I couldn't. I tried Control-Alt-Delete. Nothing. The system was a fortress. I was just a pair of eyes, bolted to this chair, paid to watch hell. The rest of the shift, until 7 o'clock, was agonizing silence. At 7 hours and 1 second, the screen went black. No logging off message. No. Goodbye. It just died, plunging me into the relative brightness of the early morning. I sat there, in the gray dawn filtering through my blinds, covered in cold sweat and tiny fragments of glass. I looked at Captain, my goldfish. He was swimming in frantic circles. I spent the day a wreck. I tried to research TerraForm solutions. Every search for them, or for Appalachian Quarantine Zone, led to dead-end domains, 404 errors, or generic placeholder sites that loaded for 5 minutes before timing out. It was like scrubbing a shadow off a wall. AT2250, my personal cell phone, the one I hadn't used for the interview, buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from an unknown, blocked number. We see you have been researching proprietary company data. This is not permitted. Further attempts will result in forfeiture of your compensation bond. I hadn't signed anything about a compensation bond. A second text came through immediately. We have also detected an unauthorized biological entity in your designated work environment. Code, Captain. Please remedy this breach of contract by 2300 hours Eastern Standard Time. My blood turned to ice. I looked at my goldfish bowl. AT2259. I was back in my chair. The bowl was empty. I felt sick. My throat burned. AT2300 hours. The screen flared to life. 12 feeds. Feed 2 was back online. The cabin, the fungus, the clearing, all of it was gone. In its place was just a smoking, blackened crater, miles wide, and in feed 9, right where the 6-fingered handprint had been, a new message was scrawled in the mud. It wasn't from admin. The letters were huge, gouged into the earth. It said, "We see you 44. My throat closed. It wasn't just a threat. It was a greeting. The things I was supposed to be monitoring, the entities I was tagging as Fauna and Intrusions, were not only aware of the drones, they were aware of the steward. They were aware of me. We see you 44. I frantically typed into the void where a chat box should be. Admin! Feed 9! Look at feed 9! The white box popped up, its text as cold as a morgue slab. Admin, we are aware of the cosmetic defacement in Sector K14. This is an environmental variable. Logged and disregarded. Cosmetic? It's a message. It knows my designation. How does it know my designation? Admin, your function is observation, Steward 44. Not correspondence. Return to your scanning perimeter. I felt bile rise in my throat. I wanted to smash the monitor. I wanted to rip the terminal out of the wall. But the text from the previous day echoed in my head. Forfeiture of your compensation bond. They didn't just have me. They owned me. I was as much a part of this cage as the things in the fog. I forced my eyes away from the words in the mud. I scanned the other feeds. 10 screens of dead, slick trees. One screen, feed 2, of a vast, smoking crater. And one screen, feed 9, of a message that sealed my terror. Then, a new notification. Admin directive update. Focus on feed 7. Scan for structural integrity. I clicked over to feed 7. The view changed. This wasn't the forest. The drone was inside. It was hovering in a long, dark hallway. The image was grainy, illuminated only by the drone's low-light sensors. The walls were tiled, peeling, and stained with a dark, wet rust that was probably not rust. Along both sides of the corridor were rows and rows of cots. Not beds. Just rusted metal frames, some with rotting, moldy green mattresses. It was an asylum. Or an orphanage. Or a field hospital. None of the options felt good. The drone drifted forward, silent and slow. The fog was in here too. It was thinner, like a layer of dust on the floor, but it was the same sickly green. Admin, your objective is to tag fault for any observed movement. My finger hovered over the key. Movement? Shouldn't I tag Fauna? I whispered. The drone continued its agonizingly slow crawl down the hallway. It passed the collapsed section of ceiling, revealing the same black, skeletal trees of the forest above. This place was buried. Then, at the far end of the hall, I saw it. A shape. It was crumpled against a door labeled Infirmary. It looked like a pile of discarded laundry. The drone moved closer. 10 feet. 5 feet. It wasn't laundry. It was a mass. A pale, heaving mass of limbs. I leaned in, my breath fogging the screen. They weren't limbs. They were hands. Dozens of them. Pale, waxy, child-sized hands, all knotted together like a ball of snakes, writhing and clasping at each other in a single, cohesive lump. As I watched, paralyzed, the mass flexed. It seemed to sense the drone. It swiveled, and a dozen tiny hands reached out, feeling the air. This was not a fault. This was a fauna. This was an intrusion. This was an abomination. Admin, tag the deviation. I hesitated. Why fault? The mass of hands suddenly uncoiled, spreading out like a grotesque spider. It scrambled up the wall, the sound of its dozens of fingernails skittering on the tile somehow audible in my head. I yelled and slammed the tag fault button. The feed didn't cut out. The image just froze for a second, a digital, tagged icon appearing over the skittering mass. And then I heard it. Scritch. 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 It wasn't in my head. It wasn't the feed. It was coming from my apartment. I spun around. My apartment was dark, lit only by the monitor's glow. The sound was coming from my front door. Scritch. 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 It was the sound of tiny, sharp fingernails dragging across wood. I stared, my heart trying to escape my chest. From the dark, narrow gap under my locked front door, a single, pale hand poked through. It was small, waxy, and glistening with the same green-tinged moisture as the fog. It wriggled its fingers, questing, feeling the carpet of my apartment. The admin box flashed on the screen, and I couldn't tear my eyes from the horrifying thing just feet away from me. Admin deviation contained. Good compliance, Steward 44. You are adapting well. Adapting? I typed, my voice a strangled squeak. There is a hand in my apartment. I was on my feet, the chair still spinning behind me. I stared at the gap under the door. The pale, child-sized hand didn't move. It just rested on my cheap carpet, its waxy fingers splayed, as if waiting. The admin box was a silent, mocking white rectangle on the screen. Admin, the deviation is registered. Its manifestation is contained to your threshold. This is a standard biodigital feedback event. Return to your console. Standard? I was hyperventilating. It's real. It's here. Admin, yes. As are you. Return to your console, Steward 44. Your shift is not complete. The hand under the door suddenly flexed. Its fingers curled inward, then slowly, deliberately it tapped the floor. Tap, tap, tap. I felt my stomach heave. I scrambled backward, hitting the wall. The hand, its point made, slowly slithered back under the door. It was gone. I was left staring at the empty gap, the only evidence of its visit a small, damp, greenish-gray smear on the carpet. I didn't move for 10 minutes. I just stood there, shaking, my entire reality rebooting in terror. Biodigital feedback event. They had a name for it. This wasn't a haunting. It was a feature. The monitor pinged. An insistent, sharp, digital sound I hadn't heard before. Admin, your attention is required. Feed 4. I stumbled back to the chair, my legs like water. I couldn't bring myself to sit down. I just hunched over the keyboard, my eyes darting between the screen and the damp spot on my floor. I focused on feed 4. It was completely different from the others. No forest, no asylum. It was a lake. A massive, perfectly still body of water, black as oil, stretching from one edge of the drone's high-altitude camera to the other. The green fog was thick here, rolling across the surface like dry ice. Admin, a unit is non-responsive in this sector. Scan for its beacon. A unit? Another drone? I typed, my fingers clumsy. Admin, affirmative. Unit 31. I scanned the vast black mirror. Nothing. Just the water and the fog. I don't see anything. Admin, a new function is enabled. Thermal/Aural scan. The T key on your custom board. I looked down. There was a T key. I'd never noticed it. I pressed it. The feed on screen 4 shimmered. The sickly green night vision was replaced by a stark, blue and orange thermal image. And I saw it. In the center of the lake, a cold blue shape. It was one of the drones, floating listlessly, half submerged. It was dead. I found it, I reported. It's in the water. Tagging fault. Admin negative. Do not tag. Activate Aural. What? Why? Admin, activate Aural. My finger trembled over the key. I pressed it. The feed didn't change, but my monitor, the one I was sure had no speakers, emitted a sound. It was a low, staticky thrum. The sound of the dead drone's beacon, I realized. A faint, pulsing ping, 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 and then, another sound joined it. It was coming from under the water. A low, vibrating moan. It was deep, resonant, and impossibly long, like a whale's song played by a church organ. Trrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr The deep, cold blue was suddenly interrupted by heat. Massive, swirling patches of orange and yellow, rising from the depths. They were huge. The size of buses. Thrrmm. The moan was louder now. It wasn't just in the feed. I could feel it in my desk, in my chair, in my teeth. The shapes, they weren't just heat. They were things. And they were rising. Admin! Something is coming up! Something big! Admin, this is the primary objective. The beacon is an irritant. The entities must be pacified. Your system has been updated. Dispersal Protocol 1. A new button appeared on my interface. It wasn't a tag. It was a simple, stark icon of a downward-facing arrow. What does it do? Admin, it administers a localized sedative. Pacify the entities, Steward 44. The shapes were breaking the surface. They weren't solid. They were gaseous. Colossal, shifting clouds of hot steam. Rising from the black water. But they had form. Vague, coiling, serpentine forms. And as they rose, the moaning thrum became a deafening, multitonal roar, and in the center of each roiling cloud of steam, a single, cold, dead white light appeared. Like an eye. All of them turned toward my drone. Admin pacify. Now. I jammed my finger on the dispersal button on the screen. A small, dark canister dropped from my drone. It hit the water. There was no explosion. Just a hiss. For a second, everything stopped. The roaring ceased. The steam clouds froze. The white light stared. Then, the water began to bubble. Not a boil. A thick, viscous foaming. The black water turned a putrid, milky white, and the sound. The sound changed. The roaring stopped, and a new sound began. It was a wet, sloppy screaming. A chorus of thousands of voices, all screaming in what sounded like agonizing, liquid pain. The admin box flashed. Protocol successful. Irritant has been pacified. I stared at the screen, horrified. The milky white lake was churning, the wet screams echoing from my monitor. You didn't sedate them," I whispered, my hand covering my mouth. "You poisoned them." The white box popped up one last time, right as my shift timer hit 6:59. "Admin, sedation is a matter of perspective. Your compliance is noted, Steward 44. See you tomorrow." The screen went black. But the sound, the screaming. I could still hear it, a faint, wet echo in my silent apartment. I didn't sleep. I don't think I can sleep anymore. I just sat in my chair for the next 16 hours, staring at the black screen, the memory of those wet, gurgling screams playing on a loop in my skull that I'd tried to leave. I'd actually stood up, grabbed my keys, and put my hand on the doorknob. The moment my skin touched the cold metal, a jolt of electricity, so strong it threw me back against the wall, arced from the lock. My hand was numb, a smell of ozone and cooked meat filling my apartment. I looked at the lock. It was a standard, cheap deadbolt. There was no wiring. A text message lit up my phone. The same block number. "The work environment is sealed for your protection, Steward 44. Attempts to leave during your contract period are considered a breach. Please do not breach." I was a prisoner. The $120,000 wasn't a salary. It was a purchase price. At 22:59, I was back in the chair, my right hand wrapped in a dirty dish towel, a fresh, angry red burn on my palm. I was filled with a new kind of dread, not the sharp panic of before, but a dull, heavy, cold dread. The dread of resignation. At 2300 hours, the screen lit up. 12 feeds. Feed 4, the lake, was dead silent. The water was a milky, opaque white, and the shores were littered with things like beach whales, but gaseous and collapsed. Deflated. Feed 9 still had its message. "We see you, 44. I imagined it was the only thing in this whole godforsaken place that was telling me the truth. "Admin, welcome back, Steward 44. Your performance metrics are acceptable. A new tasking is available. I am not your steward." I typed, my one-handed fingers slow and clumsy. "I am your prisoner." There was no reply for a full minute. I thought I'd finally broken it, finally done something to end this. "Admin, your terminology is noted. Begin primary task." Feed 11. I hadn't paid much attention to Feed 11 before. It had always been static, just the interior of a dark, concrete bunker. Now it was active. The view wasn't from a high-flying drone. It was low to the ground. And I wasn't just watching it. On-screen prompts for WSD appeared. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered. It was a ground unit. A maintenance jackal, according to the new HUD element. It was a four-legged, robotic thing, like a headless metal dog, and I was now its driver. "Admin, proceed to objective marker. A primary containment fence is offline." You will re-establish the connection. A glowing yellow icon appeared in the drone's vision, far down a crumbling concrete tunnel. I pressed W. The drone lurched forward. This was 1,000 times worse than watching. I was in it. The sound from my monitor was suddenly active, filled with the clink 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 of the jackal's metal feet on the wet floor, the drip of water, the distant, cavernous echoes. I guided it through collapsed tunnels, past rusted, sparking machinery. It felt like the guts of the asylum from before, but deeper. Much deeper. Then, the jackal's forward-facing light hit something. A sign. It was old, brass, and stained. TerraForm Adaptation Project. Cradle 03. Fauna incubation. Me blood froze. This wasn't a quarantine zone. It was a farm. Admin. I typed. What is this place? Admin, this is your work environment. Proceed to the objective. I navigated the jackal around a corner, into a vast, dark, circular room. The objective marker was on the far side, a large, sparking power conduit. I was halfway across the room when the jackal's audio sensors picked it up. Scritch. 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 I stopped. The sound echoed from the darkness above me. Admin. I hear a deviation. Fauna. Designation hand mass. Admin. The deviation is non-hostile to synthetic units. Proceed. It's right above me, isn't it? I was trembling. No reply. I nudged the W key. The jackal took one step. From the ceiling, the hand mass dropped. It landed directly in front of the jackal, blocking the path. It was bigger than it had looked on the drone feed. It was the size of a car. A writhing, pulsating, knotted-together ball of pale, glistening hands, all sizes now. Tiny, childlike ones were mixed with large, six-fingered adult hands. It wasn't attacking. It was just writhing. And it was in my way. Admin! It's blocking the path. Admin, the unit is equipped with a non-lethal deterrent. Press F. I pressed F. A high-pitched, ultrasonic shriek blasted from my monitor, so loud it made me cry out and cover my ears. On screen, the hand mass convulsed. It writhed in agony, the hundreds of hands clasping where ears should be, but there were no heads. It tore itself apart, separating into smaller clumps, and skittered back into the shadows, the scritch 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 now a sound of frantic, pained retreat. I felt sick. I just sat there, breathing hard. Admin, the path is clear. Proceed. I piloted the jackal to the conduit. A new interface popped up, a minigame, a reroute the power puzzle of connecting circuits. It was absurd. I was in hell, playing pipe dream. I solved the puzzle. The conduit hummed. The lights in the tunnel flickered on, revealing walls slick with the same black, oily substance as the trees outside. Admin, objective complete. Return Unit S to the bunker. I was turning the jackal around when its rear-facing camera caught it. In the hallway I had just come from, standing perfectly still, was the thing from the cabin. The tall, featureless, bark-skinned man. It hadn't been there a second ago. It just stood, watching. I jammed the W key, making the jackal run. I didn't care about the noise. I clattered back through the tunnels, my heart hammering. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until the jackal was back in its bunker and the feed cut to static. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 5 minutes. The admin box flashed. Excellent work, Steward 44. Your initiative has been rewarded. A nutritional supplement has been dispatched to your environment. I don't want your supplement. I want answers. Thud. A loud, heavy thud came from my apartment's front door. Not from inside. From the hallway. I crept toward the door, my burned hand throbbing. I looked through the peephole. There was nothing in the hall. But down on the floor, sitting directly in front of my door on the grimy apartment carpet, was a white, sterile, vacuum-sealed food packet. The kind astronauts eat, printed on the front, in the same cold, sans serif font as the admin text, was a single word. Sustenance. I stared at the packet. Sustenance. My stomach cramped, a painful reminder that I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My burned hand throbbed. I was a prisoner, and this was my ration. To refuse it was to die of starvation. To accept it was to, what? Become part of their system. I was already part of it. I tore the packet open with my good hand. Inside was a thick, odorless, perfectly smooth, gray paste. It looked like industrial sealant. I scooped some out with my finger. It tasted of nothing. Not bad, not good. Not salt, not sugar. It was the complete and total absence of flavor. It was like eating a void. But as it went down, a strange, chemical warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't comforting. It felt like an engine turning over. I finished the entire packet, the artificial warmth spreading to my limbs, making the skin on my good hand tingle. I sat in the chair, waiting for 2,300 hours, and a new feeling washed over me. The dread was still there, but it was sharper. The edges of my vision seemed clearer. The hum of my old refrigerator, which I'd tuned out for years, was suddenly, painfully loud. This sustenance wasn't just food. It was an upgrade. At 2,300 hours, the screen lit up. The whir of the terminal booting was so crisp it made me flinch. The 12 feeds snapped into view, and I gasped. It wasn't just clearer. I could see more. The green fog in the forest, which had always looked like a blanket, now had texture. I could see the individual, swirling particles of it. The low-light vision was no longer grainy. It was a perfect, high-definition nightmare. The admin box appeared. Admin, nutritional uptake confirmed. Your sensory acuity is now optimized. A high-value asset requires your attention. Feed 9. I looked at feed 9. The "We see you 44" was still there, gouged into the mud. But the new acuity. I could see the edges of the letters, see where the mud had been displaced, see the tiny, glowing insects crawling in the grooves. And I saw the new message. It was just below the first one, smaller, scratched in the dirt as if by a stick. Help! I stared at it. My optimized senses made it feel like I was there, kneeling in the mud, smelling the rot. This was new. This was different. Admin. I see a new message. Feed 9. Admin affirmative. A non-sanctioned communication has been detected. This is an environmental fault. A new tool has been assigned to your console, Scrubber Drone 3. You will guide it to the fault and enact pacification protocol. I knew that word. Pacification. The word that meant poison. My interface on feed 9 changed. It was no longer a high-altitude view. The feed switched to the Scrubber drone, a low-flying, wasp-like machine. The WASD controls appeared. Admin, proceed to the fault. With a sick feeling, I piloted the drone. It zipped over the black, slick trees, my new acuity, making the flight so real, so fast, I felt nauseous. I burst into the clearing. The "We see you" and "help" messages were huge from this angle. Admin, target the non-sanctioned text. A targeting reticle appeared. I centered it on the word "help." The pacify button on my console began to pulse. Wait, I typed. Who wrote it? Admin irrelevant. The fault is a form of biological graffiti. It must be sterilized. I hesitated. This was different from the lake. This was a word. A plea. As my finger hovered over the pacify button, a shape stumbled out from the tree lean. It was a person. Or, it had been. It was impossibly thin, dressed in tattered rags that looked like they might have been a uniform. Its skin was a pale, grayish white, mottled with the same glowing green fungus from the forest floor. It was rotted. It staggered into the center of the clearing, right on top of the help message, and looked up at my drone. Its face was a nightmare. The fog had eaten it. There was no nose, just a hole. The lips were gone, pulled back into a permanent rictus, revealing stained teeth. But its eyes were wide, blue, and terrified. It fell to its knees in the mud. It raised its hands, not in a threat, but in a plea, and on the tattered, shredded remains of the uniform on its back, I could just make out a stenciled number. Steward 43. The admin box flashed, covering the man's face with its sterile white text. Admin, the fault is in position. Pacify, Steward 44. My finger was a lead weight. The sustenance in my gut was singing, a high-pitched, vibrating need to complete the task. It wanted this. It wanted order. It wanted the fault to be gone. But my eyes, my human eyes, were locked on the man's. Steward 43. He wasn't a fault. He was my future. No, I typed, my good hand shaking. Admin, this is not a request. Your compliance is mandatory. Pacify the fault. On the screen, Steward 43 saw my drone hesitate. A new, frantic energy filled him. He scrambled forward, not away, but toward the clearing, toward the other message. He couldn't speak. The rod had taken his throat. But he pointed. He jabbed a fungus-eaten finger at the massive, gouged letters. We see you, 44. Then, he jabbed the same finger at his own chest. Then, he raised his hand and pointed, trembling, directly at my drone camera. He wasn't warning me about admin. He was warning me about them. The ones who wrote the message. The ones who see. Admin, compliance failure detected. Steward 44, your control input has been logged as a breach. Initiating automated protocol. No! I yelled. Don't! The pacify button on my console flashed red, then clicked, as if an invisible finger had pressed it. The word override seared itself onto my feed. My controls were locked. The WASD keys were dead. I was no longer a pilot. I was just an audience. On feed 9, the scrubber drone's nozzle swiveled. It aimed not at the word but at the man. Steward 43 knew what was coming. He didn't run. He just squeezed his ruined eyes shut and opened his lipless mouth in a silent, final scream. A stream of the same, thick, milky white poison that had killed the lake entities sprayed from the drone. It hit him. The sound that tore through my monitor speakers was nothing I have ever heard. It was the wet, gurgling roar of the lake entities, but it was human. It was a liquid shriek of absolute, cellular dissolution. He didn't just die. He unraveled. The fungus on his body flared a blinding, toxic green, like a magnesium fire, and then he melted. His rags, his skin, his bones, they just dissolved into a steaming, bubbling, white and green puddle in the mud. The help message he had written was gone, eaten away by the same poison. In 5 seconds, it was over. The clearing was silent, save for the hiss of the smoking, milky patch of mud. I was on my knees, vomiting. The gray sustenance paste came up, but it burned. It felt like I was throwing up acid and batteries. The artificial warmth in my veins had turned into a full-body fever. I wiped my mouth, shaking and sobbing, and looked back at the screen. The admin box was there. Waiting. Admin, automated pacification complete. The fault is sterilized. Your hesitation has been logged, Steward 44. This is a severe demerit. You murderer! I typed, my fingers slick with sweat and bile. Admin, we corrected a data corruption. Steward 43 ceased to be relevant 14 cycles ago. He was a breach. Do not become a breach. Your demerit requires immediate adjustment. As I read that, a new feed snapped to life. Feed 12. It had been static, pure black, since I'd started. It wasn't the forest. It wasn't a bunker. It was a grainy, low-light camera feed. A narrow, dirty, water-stained hallway. It was my hallway. Outside my apartment door. Admin, a new variable has been introduced to your environment to ensure future compliance. What did you do? I whispered. From the far end of the hall, by the elevators, a shape stepped into the camera's view. It was tall. Impossibly thin. Its limbs were like stretched out lengths of black, peeling bark. It moved with that horrifying, jerky, stop-motion gait. It was the thing from the cabin. It walked, slowly, methodically, down the hallway. It stopped, right in front of my apartment door. It stood there, motionless, filling the peephole camera's view, and the feed cut to black. Feed 12 was black, but the real thing was just on the other side of a half-inch of particle board and a cheap deadbolt. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My entire universe had shrunk to the 10-foot by 10-foot box of my apartment, and something was knocking. No. Not knocking. A slow, dry, scraping sound moved across the wood of my door. The sound of a dead branch, hard as iron, being dragged from the top hinge all thread way down to the bottom. SSKKKKKRE. I was flattened against the far wall, my burned hand pressed to my mouth to stifle my own sobs. Then, a single, impossibly sharp sound, like a hammer striking stone, cracked through the apartment. Thwack. It came from the peephole. I stared, trembling. The tiny, fisheye lens of the peephole was gone. In its place was a splintered black hole. It had punched its way through. A thin, gray tendril of that godforsaken green fog, the fog from K14, wafted through the new hole, coiling into my apartment air like a curious snake. The admin box appeared on the monitor, which was still glowing, still demanding my attention. Admin, the compliance variable is in place. Your proximity to this deterrent will ensure optimal performance. Return to your console. It broke my door. I typed, my whole body shaking. It's trying to get in. Admin, the variable is stationed. It is not permitted entry unless you are in breach. You are not currently in breach. Your hesitation is logged. Resume your duties. I had to choose. Stare at the hole in my door, through which I could now smell, oh God, the smell. That oily, black tree, ozone and rot smell, or turn my back on it and work. This sustenance, in my gut was a cold, hard knot. It wanted me to work. It was a traitor inside me. With a whimper, I stumbled back to the chair, my eyes darting between the screen and the splintered hole. Tap. 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 The sound was coming from the door now. Not a knock. A pat. A slow, rhythmic patting, as if it was soothing the wood. Or testing it. Admin feed 3. A new objective is available. I clicked on feed 3, my senses screaming. The sustenance had amplified everything. I could hear the flicker of the drone's low-light sensors. I could hear the skitter of the thing in the hall. The feed showed a new area. A pen. It was a circular, concrete-walled enclosure, maybe 100 yards across, open to the skeletal tree sky. Inside, a single creature was limping. It was one of the three-legged coyotes I'd seen my first night. It looked starved, its fur matted with green fungus. Admin, this asset, Canid 07, has refused sustenance for 3 cycles. It is non-compliant. Your task is to guide it to the nutrition hub, Marker A. Marker A was a dark, square hole in the far wall. A chute. How? I typed. Admin, aural lures are now enabled for this drone. Lure positive, L key, and lure negative, N key. I pressed L. A soft, chittering, clicking sound emitted from the drone on screen. The three-legged coyote perked up, its ears twitching. It took one hopeful, limping step toward the drone, then cowered, retreating to the far wall. Admin, this is inefficient. This asset's motivation is fear-based. Use lure negative to establish avoidance parameters. My finger hovered over the N key. I didn't want to. I knew what this company considered a negative lure. Tap, tap, tap. The sound from my door was louder, more insistent. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed N. The sound that blasted from my monitor was not a beep. It was not a buzzer. It was the sound of Steward 43. It was his final, wet, gurgling, dissolving scream. On feed 3, the three-legged coyote lost its mind. It yelped, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, and scrambled, its one good leg working furiously, to get away from the sound. It didn't just run to the nutrition hub. It threw itself into the black, square hole to escape the noise of that death. Admin, task complete. Asset Candid 07 is now compliant. Your efficiency is noted. I was hyperventilating, my face in my good hand. I had just tortured a tortured animal with the sound of a murdered man's death. Tap, tap, tap. The sound from the door. It wasn't just patting anymore. Tap, 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 tap. It was a rhythm. It was a code, and I recognized it. It was the cadence of the ping from the downed drone in the lake. The beacon. The irritant. Tap, 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 tap. The thing in my hallway wasn't just a monster. It wasn't just a guard. It was remembering, and it was bored. The rhythmic tapping from the hallway stopped. I waited, my entire body a single, tensed muscle, my ears, now painfully sharp, straining in the silence. The green fog was still seeping, atom by atom, through the splintered peephole. Then, a new sound began. It was not a tap. It was a low, vibrating thrum. The sound of a cello string being bowed an octave below human hearing. I felt it in my teeth before I heard it, a resonant, deep-chested moan that was an exact, perfect mimicry of the lake entities. The watcher outside my door wasn't just bored. It wasn't just remembering. It was learning. It was imitating. The floor of my apartment began to vibrate. Admin! I typed, my fingers flying. The variable! It's calling something. It's making the sound from feed 4. Admin, we are aware. The variable's mimicry is a known, though rare, behavior. It is communicating. The acoustic pattern is being analyzed. Ignore it. Ignore it? It's shaking my apartment. Admin, your emotional state is a breach. Your sustenance-enhanced senses are making you unreliable. Focus. We have a new asset in orientation. Your immediate attention is required. Feed 5. Feed 5, which had always been pure static, flickered to life. It was a room. A perfect 6x6 concrete cube. No door. A single cot. On the floor, a single, white sustenance packet, just like the one I'd eaten. A man was huddled in the far corner, his knees drawn to his chest. He was wearing a clean, new, orange jumpsuit. Admin, this is Steward 45. His observation period has begun. He is currently non-compliant. He refuses sustenance. What am I supposed to do? I typed, my blood running cold. Talk to him? Encourage him? Admin, you are not a Steward 44. You are a tool. Your function is to demonstrate. A new function is enabled, live broadcast. Your primary feed, Steward 44, is now being streamed to Steward 45's orientation cell. Your compliance is his lesson. I stared at the text. My feed? I looked back at feed 5. The man in the cell, 45, suddenly flinched. He looked up. Not at the camera in his own cell. He looked at the blank concrete wall directly opposite him, and the wall lit up. It was a screen, and on that screen, I saw myself. I saw a grainy, low-light, wide-angle shot of my apartment, of me hunched over my monitor in my gamer chair, my face pale and slick with sweat, my right hand wrapped in a dirty dish towel. Steward 45 was watching a live broadcast of my terror. He scrambled to his feet. He was young. Younger than me. He pressed his hands against the screen wall, his eyes wide. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at my monitor, at my screen, trying to see what I was seeing. The TRRUM from my hallway got louder, a jealous, angry sound. The admin box flashed, appearing on my screen, and I realized with a wave of nausea, on the screen in his cell. He was reading this too. Admin now, Steward 44. A new task. Feed 8. A Fauna asset, hand mass, is in breach of its containment perimeter. Show Steward 45, how we pacify. The pacify button on my console began to pulse. My eyes flicked from my monitor to feed 5. To the face of Steward 45, who was watching me. His terror was a perfect, agonizing mirror. The sustenance in my veins was a living thing. It screamed for me to press the button. It was a hot, electric need to restore order, to eliminate the fault. The drug loved compliance. The TRRUM from the hallway got louder, rattling the empty sustenance packet on my desk. The watcher was getting impatient. It was a feedback loop of terror. The monster in the hall was the stick, and Steward 45 was the what? The new carrot? Admin, demonstrate compliance, 44. The asset is waiting. On feed 8, the handmass pulsed, oblivious, its dozens of tiny fingers grasping at the empty air. On feed 5, Steward 45 put his hands over his own ears, as if he could already hear the screams. He was learning. I looked at my own burned, shaking hand. I looked at the splintered hole in my door. No. I typed the word. It felt like I just pulled a pin on a grenade. The admin box, which was always so calm, so cold, flashed. A violent, blinding red, searing itself onto my retina, and I knew, onto the wall of 45's cell. Breach. 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 Steward 44 is in breach. Compliance variable is now active. This is your final warning. KRICK. The sound was not from my monitor. It was the sound of my deadbolt, my cheap metal lock, snapping in two like a dry twig. The thrumming from the hall stopped, replaced by the sound of splintering wood as the door was pushed inward. The watcher was inside. It had to stoop to get through the doorway. It was a 9-foot-tall silhouette of peeling bark and impossible joints, backlit by the single, dim, fluorescent light of my apartment building's hallway. The green fog from K14, which had been a mere wisp, now poured in around its feet, rolling across my carpet like a physical thing. I was off my chair, scrambling back, hitting the wall. I screamed. The creature took one jerky, stop-motion step into my apartment. It was it turned its head. That long, pale, featureless plank of wood, it faced me. The admin box flashed again. Return to compliance, Steward 44. Pacify the asset. Now. The monster took another step, its foot, a gnarled mass of roots, crushing my empty goldfish bowl. It was 10 feet away. My mind shattered. The moral choice, the horror, Steward 45, it all evaporated. There was only the creature, the smell of ozone and wet rot, and the all-consuming, animal need to make it stop. I lunged for the console. I didn't just press the pacify button. I punched it with my good hand, so hard my knuckles cracked out on feed 8, the hand mass dissolved. I heard its skittering, liquid shriek for half a second before I mentally shut it out. The instant the act was complete, the instant I had complied, the watcher in my apartment froze. Its entire, gangly body went rigid. It slowly, impossibly, cocked its head, like a dog hearing a new sound. It looked, from me, to the monitor, and back to me. Then, with a terrifying, deliberate slowness, it took one jerky step, backwards. It stepped back into the hallway. It reached out a long, six-fingered hand, grabbed the splintered, broken frame of my door, and pulled it shut with a gentle, final click. I was alone again. I collapsed, sobbing, a heap of my own sweat and terror. The admin box appeared. Compliance re-established. Good. The breach is sealed. Your demerit is under review. I was still crying when I looked up. The monitor was still active. I looked at feed 5. Steward 45 was no longer cowering. He had watched the entire thing. He'd watched me break. He'd watched me choose my own life. He was standing now, his face pressed close to the screen wall that showed my sobbing, pathetic form. The terror in his eyes was gone. It had been replaced by a new, cold, terrifying emotion. It wasn't hatred for admin. It wasn't fear of the monster. It was a pure, focused, absolute contempt for me. The contempt on 45's face was a mirror I couldn't break. He didn't just see a coward. He saw a preview. He saw what he would have to become to survive, and he hated me for showing him the blueprint. I sat in the silence, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the faint, wet drip of the green fog tendrils condensing on my floor. The watcher was gone, but the smell was burned into the room. It was permanent. My door was broken. The lock was shattered. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me more than any monster, that I was safer in here than I had ever been out there. At 6:59, a text came to my phone. Admin, a maintenance unit will be dispatched to repair your threshold breach. Do not interact. At 7:01, the screen went black. I waited. 1 hour. 2:89:15, I heard it. A quiet, mechanical whirring in the hallway. I crept to the door and looked through the splintered peephole. It was one of the Jackal ground units, the metal dog I had piloted. It was standing right outside my door. It wasn't piloted by anyone. It was autonomous. A set of delicate, spider-like arms unfolded from its chassis. With terrifying, inhuman precision, it repaired my door. It didn't just fix the lock, it rebuilt the frame. It mended the splintered wood, sealed the peephole, and installed a new, heavy, steel deadbolt from the outside. When it was finished, my door was a fortress. And I was sealed inside. It whirred, turned, and walked down the hall. I spent the day in a sustenance-fueled haze. The gray paste was the only thing I craved. The warmth it gave me was the only thing that felt real. The hunger for it was a physical, gnawing need. At 2300 hours, the screen lit up. My hands were already on the keyboard. Admin, your sustenance uptake is efficient. Steward 45 has also accepted sustenance. His adaptation is proceeding at an accelerated rate. You will now engage in a collaborative task. My feed lit up. Feed 5, 45's cell, was now a split screen. One side was his console, a perfect copy of mine. The other was a Jackal feed. He was in the driver's seat. Admin, Steward 44, you will provide aerial overwatch, feed 1. Steward 45, you will navigate the primary sewer conduit to Data Hub Epsilon. 44, your task is to clear 45's path. 45, your task is to proceed. I was in a high-altitude drone, looking down at a vast, crumbling concrete canyon. A sewer. 45's jackal was a small, green icon at the mouth of the tunnel. Admin 44, an organic fault is blocking the primary gate. Designate lure negative. I looked. It wasn't one of the hand masses. It was something new. A massive, pulsating, fungal wall of tissue, covered in glowing green pustules, completely blocking the tunnel 45 needed to enter. Lure negative. I typed, my fingers moving before my brain could object. The need to complete the task was a drug. I pressed end on my screen. Nothing happened. But on 45's split-screen feed, I saw him flinch. His camera shook. He was hearing the scream. I was his lure negative. The admin box flashed. Incorrect 44. Your local lure is ineffective. You must use the localized drone. A new drone, a small scrubber on the ground, became available. I piloted it to the fungal wall. I pressed N. The sound of Steward 43's death screamed from the drone. The fungal wall recoiled in on itself, its pustules bursting in a shower of green glowing spores. The path was clear. Admin good. 45, proceed. 45's jackal bolted forward. He wasn't hesitant. He wasn't scared. He was fast out. I watched from above as his little green icon moved into the tunnels. My job was to watch his back. Admin 44, a new Fauna signature is approaching 45's position from the south. I panned my camera. It was Steward 43. Or another one like him. A rotted, shambling figure, its fungus-eaten eyes glowing. 45. I typed frantically into a new, shared chat window. Stop! Entity south. 10 meters. 45's icon didn't stop. The shambling steward burst from a side tunnel, directly into the jackal's path. Before I could even tag it, before I could think to pacify it, 45's jackal unit acted. He didn't use a lure. He didn't hesitate. He pressed F. The deterrent. The ultrasonic shriek blared, and at the same time, the jackal rammed the creature. It smashed the rotted steward against the wall, the shriek pinning it, and then a set of industrial drills I didn't even know the jackal's had extended from its chassis and liquefied the entity. It was over in 2 seconds. A smear of green-black paste on the wall. 45's icon didn't even pause. It just continued down the tunnel. I stared, horrified. He wasn't just compliant. He was brutal. The admin box flashed, visible to us both. Steward 45 shows excellent initiative. His problem-solving metrics are optimal. Steward 44, your performance is the baseline. Do not fall below the baseline. The shift ended. 45 had reached his data hub. Admin, collaboration complete. Your performance, 44, was sufficient. Your sustenance ration has been adjusted. Thud. A single packet hit my door. I waited, my stomach knotted with the need. 1 packet? It wasn't enough. I needed more. The warmth, the clarity, thud. 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 3 more packets hit the door, one after another. A new text from admin. Steward 45's ration has been reallocated to you. He has declined. What? Why? I crept to my door. My new, steel-plated, externally locked door. It didn't open. I pulled. It was sealed. Admin? I typed at the black screen. Admin! The door is locked. I need my sustenance. The panic was immediate and chemical. The need was so strong it was making my skin crawl. Admin! Let me out! No reply. The packets were right there, just on the other side of the door. I could smell them, that faint, ozonated, stereoplastic smell. And I was locked in. Scritch. 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 The sound was faint, but it was back. It was coming from inside my apartment. I spun around. In the far corner, by the refrigerator, the wall was wrong. It was bulging, as if something was pushing on the drywall from the inside. As I watched, a single, pale, child-sized hand punched through the plaster, showering the floor with white dust. The admin box flashed on the dark screen. Admin, Steward 45's noncompliance is a fault. His sustenance has been rerouted. But a breach must be pacified. And a steward cannot be hungry for pacification. The hand mass. It wasn't a fault. It was a tool. A dozen more hands burst through the wall, pulling plaster and insulation. The scritch, scritch, scritch was the sound of them. They were coming. Admin, this is your new lure negative, Steward 44. Do not fail. The wall collapsed, and the writhing, car-sized mass of hands, the ones I had pacified, poured into my apartment. I was a rat in a box with a snake. The hand mass didn't attack. That would have been a mercy. It poured into the room, a tide of pale, writhing limbs, and simply settled. It took over the corner where my fridge had been, displacing it, the skitter-scritch sound of its hundreds of fingernails, a new, constant, ambient noise in my life. I was flattened against the opposite wall, by my useless, now sealed door. The craving for the sustenance was a physical, screaming agony. It was a hook in my stomach, pulling me toward the 4 packets I knew were just inches away, on the other side of the steel. My acuity was gone. My vision was blurry, my hands were shaking, my teeth chattered with a cold, chemical need. Admin! I screamed at the black monitor, pounding on the sealed door with my good hand. I'm trapped. It's in here. I need the sustenance. Let me out. The admin box, my only god, flashed to life, a cold white light in my new, shared tomb. Admin, the lure negative is in place. It is proximate. This is an incentive. Do not fail. The hand mass in the corner rustled. It wasn't looking at me. It was busy. It was coiling in on itself, the hundreds of hands knitting together, building something. A nest. I was trapped. Trapped with this thing, and trapped without the drug. I didn't know which was worse. At 2300 hours, the monitor lit up. My shift. My salvation. Admin, your sustenance deficiency is critical. A new objective is available. Failure will result in permanent deficiency. The words sent a jolt of pure terror through me, more potent than any monster. Permanent deficiency. Feed 10 snapped on. A new feed. It wasn't a forest. It wasn't a bunker. It was a nursery. A sterile, metal room, lined with dozens of industrial, steel-barred cribs. The camera was high, looking down. In a single crib, in the center, something was moving. Admin, this is Asset Alpha. It has been decanted. It requires imprinting. You will perform the lullaby protocol. I piloted the drone closer. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a monster. It was a baby. A perfectly, horribly normal-looking human baby, wrapped in a gray TerraForm blanket. And it was crying. A thin, reedy wail that cut through the silence. What is this? I typed, my shakes so bad I mistyped 3 times. What am I supposed to do? Admin, the asset's agitation is a fault. Your lure negative, the hand mass in your environment, is the source code for the lullaby. Your console is now slaved. Activate lullaby protocol. A new button appeared. A simple musical note. I looked at the baby on the screen. I looked at the thing in my corner. The connection slammed into me, the hand mass. It's a mother. As if sensing my hesitation, the mass in my apartment hissed. It uncoiled slightly, a dozen tiny, pale hands reaching out toward me. I slammed the button. The sound that played from the drone in the nursery wasn't music. It was the scritch, scritch, scritch of my apartment. It was the ambient sound of the hand mass in my corner, amplified. On feed 10, the baby stopped crying. Instantly. It turned its tiny head, its eyes unfocused, listening. A flicker of recognition passed over its face. And then it smiled. A gurgling, happy, infantile smile. In my apartment, the hand mass went still. The frantic skittering stopped. It relaxed. A low, deep, wet purring sound, the screeching turned soft and rhythmic, filled my apartment. It was content. Admin imprinting successful. Asset alpha is pacified. The lure is dormant. Your reward is authorized. I stared at the sleeping mass of hands in my corner. Then I stared at the door. Click. HSSSS. A sound of metal sliding. My new steel deadbolt was being unlocked. From the outside, the door cracked open, just 6 inches. I froze. Standing in the hallway, a massive, 9-foot-tall silhouette blocking the light, was the watcher. It didn't move. It just stood there, looking at me with its featureless, plankwood face. Then, one of its long, black, 6-fingered hands, a hand as big as my chest, entered the apartment. In its palm were the 4 sustenance packets. It was offering them. I had to move. I had to walk past the dormant, purring hand mass toward the watcher, and take the food from its hand. My body, driven by the need, moved for me. I crept across the floor. I reached out my shaking, unburned hand. The creature's skin was dry, hard, and cold as iron. I snatched the packets. The watcher's hand retreated. The door slowly closed. The steel deadbolt thudded back into place. I was sealed in. Again, but this time, I had my reward. And I was alone, except for the sleeping, purring, car-sized mass of hands in my corner. I tore open a packet, my hands shaking, and stuffed the gray, flavorless paste into my mouth. The chemical warmth hit me, and my world snapped back into sharp, perfect sustenance, fueled focus. I ate, my eyes never leaving the monster. I wasn't a steward. I wasn't a prisoner. I was a roommate. And the rent was due.